with that in mind, let's move on to our next guest. And this is a gentleman I've heard about for a long time. So for so many, last couple of years I've gotten involved with things. People saying, "Hey, have you spoken to Carl yet? Have you spoken to Carl?" And it's always one to say, "Yeah, I got to give him a call." And I'm always expecting to run into him at some event or another. We never have. And he very nicely sent me an email a couple of weeks back at the beginning of the year and talked about what he does, and he's got a very impressive resume, but more than that, he's got a tremendous love for local history here in Queens, and that's just such a great thing. It's a great person to talk to, very, very interesting, and recently sent me a photograph, and I'm looking at this photograph right now. It's a photograph of the Brooklyn Manor train station on Jamaica Avenue. And this is on the south side of Jamaica Avenue, and it's actually on the Richmond Hill side. And it is, I believe that's where this is. I could be wrong. Carl told me that. I was looking at it. But, I mean, it's just amazing how this platform and everything fit in right there. It's just a great picture. But the funny thing is, when I opened this up, when I got the email from him, he sent me this picture. He said, "Hey, have you seen this picture?" And I'm opening up on my iPhone, and I'm looking at this thing. I'm waiting for this thing to open up. And when I look at the picture, I am sitting in Seatown's parking lot, like 15 feet away from where this picture is of. And it was just an amazing coincidence, sitting right there. And then when my mom came out, I'm showing her this picture. Look what I just got this picture of. And we pull out 2 steps, and I'm like, there it is. Amazing. So we're very happy to be joined by Carl Ballenas, who is the chairman of the Friends of the Maple Grove Cemetery and Kew Gardens, and he's also on the board of the Richmond Hill Historical Society. They had a meeting tonight, and he joins us now, Mr. Carl Ballenas. And Carl, how are you tonight?
Fine, thank you very much. How are you doing?
Just doing fantastic. Really good to hear your voice. How'd your meeting go tonight?
We had a packed house. We had Vivian Carter, who was the author of the Rockaway book on the Arcadia published book, and she had a packed house too. She had a great presentation, slideshow presentation of images from her book, and she was telling us that about 67 of those images she was able to get from the Rockaway Museum. And it was so fortunate that she scanned them because Hurricane Sandy destroyed them.
Oh, man.
So and many more pictures as well. So it was just by luck that she had scanned them months before, and they were on her computer. Because we won't find those images again, but we'll see them in her book now. And it's a great book, and people got online and bought the book, and she signed it for them. So it was great to hear her.
Very nice. All right, so tell us. Let's go back and tell us, how you developed this love of local history.
Oh, I was actually born in Brooklyn, and my parents bought a house in Richmond Hill, and we moved out here in the '60s, and so I lived in Richmond Hill, and growing up, I went to PS 54, then I went to Our Lady of the Senecal School, and then I went on to Richmond Hill High School. And I always loved history. And what happened is that I was attending St. Benedict Joseph Church, which is in Richmond Hill, and I was looking at a photograph of one of their windows, and actually was destroyed. The window was destroyed in a fire, and the cherry pick from the fire department actually went through the stained glass window to get the smoke out of the building. And some of the panels were saved, and one panel that I saw in an old photograph, it said Mr. Lally, and I knew from church records that Mr. Lally was the gentleman from Richmond Hill who petitioned the bishop to start this parish in 1892. But underneath it said Joseph Lally petitions Bishop Morris Park. And I'm saying, gee, where is Morris Park? This is Richmond Hill. What are they talking about? So I was a teenager, and I was saying, this is interesting. So I started going into the old newspapers, going to the library, and lo and behold, I find Morris Park was originally a settlement south of Jamaica Avenue, and was absorbed by Richmond Hill in 1892. So here we go. I'm living in a ghost town. And so it was like, I didn't even know I was living in Morris Park. So that just piqued my interest, and I wanted to know more about. And then I found Dunton, which was the other town next to it that was absorbed by Richmond Hill. And then there was Berlin, and then there was other towns. And it was like, wow, this is phenomenal. All these little towns, all these settlements. And then they all came together, and Richmond Hill is a cluster of different settlements. And Richmond Hill was started in 1868. And it grew from 25 acres to, how big it is today. And but it was, and I said, oh, gee, I started to collect some postcards, and I'm saying to myself, how many postcards could there be of old Richmond Hill? 5? I'm up to about 500 now in my private collection. So, and I'm reading about so many fascinating people, and everything's connected. So you read about the police department, then you read about the how it was the city was run, the little village was run. Then you read about the library, then you read about the churches. So it all blends together, and then you read about the mother village. And what's the mother village? Jamaica, which was founded in 1656, and who signed the charter? Peter Stuyvesant. So it was like, oh my God, I'm reading history. His history's right in front of me. And Richmond Hill was part of the Jamaica territory. And then the northern part of Richmond Hill, which was kind of the playground where you would go picnicking and you'd go hunting, you'd go ice skating up in the hills, that was Kew Gardens. And it wasn't developed because it was too hilly until 1908, when they had the machinery to develop the land. So Kew Gardens becomes the granddaughter. So you have Jamaica, the mother, Richmond Hill, the daughter, and then you have a granddaughter. So everything just follows. And every time I turn an old newspaper or look on a microfilm, I find another story, and then another story, and I start putting them all together. And I've written 4 books now, co-authored 4 books. Richmond Hill was the first, and I co-authored that with Nancy Cataldi, a great preservationist. Yeah. And this is we're marking the 5th anniversary this year for passing. And then the next book was with Nancy Cataldi again, was Maple Grove Cemetery. And then with my students I'm a school teacher, so that's 33 years now. And I teach history. History, so yeah, go figure. So I asked them to co-author a book with me. This is the Aquinas Honor Society, and we did our own backyard. We did Jamaica Estates, where the school is located, Immaculate Conception. And then we had so much information on the mother village, Jamaica, that they asked us to write another book, and that was the Images of America, Jamaica. And I just wanted to let you know that we got another call, and now we just signed a contract to do another book. We're going to do Kew Gardens.
Excellent. Very good.
So that's going to be my 5th Arcadia book on the history of the Kew Gardens, and it's all connected. It's just phenomenal. Like I'm going through the Kew Gardens interment book, and I find people from all over. And I just came across Antonia Thorette, who's buried at Maple Grove Cemetery, and he has a beautiful monument. And he lived in Woodhaven. He was born in 1813 and died in 1888. And in his obituary, it said that he settled in Woodhaven. He became a store and hotel keeper, and he said in the article it said he witnessed the growth of that town. At that time, the Lalance and Grosjean factory was just starting and employed 18 men, and the village had no more than 6 houses.
Wow.
That's incredible to read. And when you read that when you present that to your kids in the classroom setting, in the area, and say, at one time there were 6 houses. Go out and count how many there are now. Now that's a great math problem. So, so it makes history comes alive when you love it, and when you can get your students inspired to look around their own backyard. George Washington, great. Lincoln, great. That's all stuff we have to know. But, what about your own roots? What about the, who lived in your house? Who walked on your block? Who took out that library book that you're taking out now? People who had the same hopes and inspirations that you had.
Yeah, that's exactly. I mean, that's the thing. When you can relate, can relate to the people back then, and make those stories come alive, that makes difference. Now let me ask you something, because when you were talking there, I mean, truthfully, I really wasn't involved in very much until late 2008.
Yes.
So I never had the pleasure of meeting Nancy Cataldi. I've heard so much about her. Just take a few minutes. Just tell us a little bit about her and who she was and what she contributed.
Nancy Cataldi. She was a Richmond Hill girl. She went to Richmond Hill High School. She was a phenomenal fashion photographer. Oh, was she a great photographer? And what happened is that her mother had a little Italian restaurant. Her mother was a phenomenal cook, and it was called Lucia's, and her name was Lucy. And she had a restaurant by the Van Wyck and Jamaica Avenue. And they were in the area for many years. And eventually she bought a house in Richmond Hill on 109th Street. And it was one of those old Victorian houses, which she loved. And she put her heart into this house, and she restored the kitchen. She put the tin ceiling on the ceiling, and she worked on the porch. And she went around and started collecting seeds and plants from gardens around Richmond Hill, because she recognized that some of them were over 100 years old. Old poppies, old hydrangea plants, old roses, and so she loved to garden. And in 1997, they started doing little house and garden tours, and she had fixed up her house so nicely that it was part of the tour. And and from that group of people, the homeowners, the Richmond Hill Historical Society was formed. And Ivan was the first president, and Nancy became president after. And she was very fortunate. She wasn't retired. She was a young woman. She wasn't retired, but she had a job that offered her free time. She would go out, do a photo shoot out in Arizona, for a week or two, and she'd get a nice salary, and then she'd come back and she'd wait 2 or 3 weeks for another job to come in, and so she had that time that we rarely have when we do volunteer work. And she got into the history of Richmond Hill, her community. And she started looking around, and she started getting involved with the politicians. And she contacted me because she knew I had this love of history. And I was unofficially the Richmond Hill historian, and I was giving old slideshows of the neighborhood from my postcard collection and things that I gathered, and whenever I see something that's close by, like the Brooklyn Manor, I said, I got to save this, it's close by.
Sure.
You never know when I'm going to need it, and what happens? You tell me about Woodhaven, I said, I got this picture, let me send it to you.
That's awesome.
So
I
always believe you have to share everything. I've had collectors who hoard everything. They won't
hoard
even
it.
let anyone say, what's going on here? What are you going to do with it?
I'm so glad you said that, because I've noticed two weird things with this with photographs and everything. It's A, how people hoard them, and B, how people. I mean, and I understand this competitive nature, but how people need to be the first to get it. I understand. It's a great film, but how some people hoard it. It's a strange thing.
That's a strange thing, and the love for having an original. I have that feeling too. I love having an original, but I'd be happy with a secondhand copy, because now I can see the image. And sometimes you read about people, so many people, then you find a face. You find a photograph in a newspaper, and it's like, it takes your breath away. I've been reading about you for your whole. I know when you were born. I know when you died. I know everything you did, but I never knew what you looked like. And then all of a sudden you find that face, and it's like, oh my God, an old friend. And that's what scares me sometimes, because I know more people at Maple Grove than I know who are alive. So I said, oh my God, I got to get more living friends. But Nancy, back to Nancy, she just loved the neighborhood, and she went around and she wanted to preserve. She became a preservationist, and she saw things being torn down, and it broke her heart. And so she got very deeply involved, and she got things, people listened to her, because she did her research, and she had a personality that everyone just loved her. And so when she passed, it was just a huge shock for us. And but we want to, as I said, this is her 5th anniversary of her passing. And so at Maple Grove, and she was a historian at Maple Grove too. I brought it into the cemetery. I said, this is a phenomenal place. And I was trying to explain to her and to other people that every town has a local cemetery, but we don't utilize it for historical research.
Right.
So much here, and every town in America has a cemetery, and the things that we could do. For example, the Friends of Maple Grove have a full calendar, which I'm going to email to you. I think I've emailed it to you already.
Yeah, but, I've been looking at it on the website, sure.
One of the things we're doing is on April 27 is something called Victoriana Day. Mm-hmm. And what it basically is, we honor everyone who's at the cemetery, and we try to do, we're very fortunate. Maple Grove is one of the few cemeteries in the United States that has such foresight that when they created their new office building, they not only added office space, but they also created a concert hall.
That's great.
And a classroom space / community space. Mm-hmm. And now you can have these. So when I'm looking at this, when I looked at this building that went up, and I'm looking at this beautiful, beautiful space called the Celebration Hall, I said, well, how do we use it? Well, we have concerts, because who's buried at Maple Grove? Jimmy Rushing. Jimmy Rushing, is a phenomenal singer with Count Basie for 20 years. He was called Mr. 5x5. 5 feet tall, 5 feet wide, wonderful, wonderful person, beautiful voice. So we had a jazz concert in his honor. Then you do more digging. You find these other musicians, Laverne Baker, Tweedledee from the 60s. I Cry a Tear, Jim Dandy to the rescue. So another concert in her honor. And then we found Vincent Yeomans. Vincent Yeomans wrote Tea for Two and No No Nanette and Hit the Deck on Broadway.
Wow.
So, and he's there, and there's a proverb, an ancient Egyptian proverb that's carved in stone in the center at Maple Grove. And this is what my philosophy is when I've been involved with this cemetery. It said, to speak the name of the dead is to bring them back to life. And that's what our goal is, the Friends of Maple Grove, is to bring them back to tell their story, to bring their life story back. And so when I say the name Vincent Yeoman, it's like he's back alive again. Mm-hmm. We have a concert with his on. So we're going to have a Broadway concert in a tribute to him. And we had one. And then who else? I found the Levines, Joseph and Rosina, and they lived in Kew Gardens. I had a beautiful house, and it's still there in Kew Gardens. They built it in 1919. They came from Russia. And they were pianists, first-class pianists. They both won gold medals from the Moscow Conservatory in piano. And they came to America. They migrated here, and they came to this school in Manhattan, and they became teachers, and that school eventually became Juilliard.
Wow.
And Rosina was the piano teacher for Van Cliburn.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And there's a beautiful, beautiful documentary on PBS about her life. And she had many famous students. Levine from the Philharmonic conductor. She had another student that in the documentary, she mentions that he's a very good pianist, but she saw something in his composition as a composer, and she encouraged him. And who does that turn out to be? John Williams.
Oh, wow.
Who's up for an Oscar tomorrow, Sunday night.
Yeah, amazing, yeah.
Yeah. So that was another her, and he's in the documentary talking about how Rosina passed on her talent to all her students, with playing the piano, and then those students passing the techniques of Rosina and Joseph to their students, and then it continues, and it goes on and on and on, and generations from now, they'll have the technique of Rosina and Joseph because the teachers will teach them. And it's been passed down from teacher to student, from student to teacher. It's phenomenal. So we have classical. We have a classical right here in Queens.
Right here.
My goal, a cemetery in Brooklyn that I love, and you know this cemetery, Greenwood. Phenomenal place. The work they do is phenomenal. And my dream is if I could make Maple Grove just a mini version of Greenwood, because we have 65 acres. They have over 600 acres.
Oh, boy.
And they have a phenomenal program. but we have a concert space, and so we have all these, and so this Victoriana Day is so we honor many people, and we bring their history back to life, and this Victoriana Day is to honor the Victorian period that the cemetery was built in 1875. Mm-hmm. And I came across some articles. I recently told you, I found Sarah Ball, and Sarah Ball's husband, Edward, was the vice president at the Lance factory in Woodhaven. Mm. And she died in 1895, and she's at Greenwood. So what we had done, what I had done in 2004, it was I try to find different things that reach my students. And what was happening before that was the Internet came. And the Internet was a blessing, but at the same time it was a curse for teachers. Because I would assign them, a historical figure, do a report on George Washington. And I was getting cut and paste. I was getting no learning, no learning. And what made it even worse was that they'd even cut out the commercials at the bottom. The little ads. And it was like, why could you hand this in to me? And who is George Washington? I don't know. What did he do? I don't know. It was like all you learned was to hit your finger on a little and find it. And so I'm thinking to myself, I can't find the Internet. The Internet is phenomenal, but I have to learn and adapt. So what I told them to do is, yes, I'll accept it, but before you give it to me, you have to underline or highlight the important parts of this person's life, then take those highlighted sentences and turn it into a 1-minute speech in the first person. I am George Washington, and memorize it. And memorize it. So that's 1 minute. I said, what's a 1-minute speech? You can do it, not a problem. And so they did. And then the next year, it was that they all have their speeches memorized. They did little posters now, and I'm saying to them, your parents should see this because you're doing a good job. So we picked a night and we called it the museum. Come to the Museum of Historical Figures, and the parents would come in and they would see their kids dressed up in costumes. They started to put on a costume, and it was so much fun. But the problem is I had over 90 kids. And I'm trying to say to myself, how do I keep these kids quiet? And they're so noisy. So what I told them, I hit upon an idea. I said, pretend you're wax mechanical figures that when someone drops a coin in your little cup, you're going to become a robot and you're going to come alive, give your speech, and then fall asleep again. And they loved it. They loved to become little robots. And so it kept them very quiet. You couldn't hear a pin drop. And we raised about, I think it was $400 in quarters and dimes one night. And the parents just loved it. And I knew the president at Maple Grove Cemetery. Always do something different the next year. So I knew the president of Maple Grove Cemetery. And I said, and she lived close by, and I said, come to see this great wax museum thing we do at school with historical figures. She came and she loved it. And I said to her, wouldn't it be grand if we did this at your cemetery, and we did it with famous people buried at your cemetery, like Rosina Levine or Vincent Yeomans, the great composer? And she loved the idea. So we picked a day. So we did it. We called it Spirits Alive. And so the kids got dressed in costumes, did the research, and they stood at different grave sites in the old Victorian section. And here we had a phenomenal day where the kids are actually giving to the community. And they're learning about their history. They're learning about the history of their community. Here we have a little girl dressed like Rosina Levine, telling about how she was a piano teacher, how she lived in Kew Gardens, how she came and became her protege was Ben Clyburn. So it was a great experience. And so now we're doing this Victoriana Day, as I said, on April 27th, just to kind of honor the time period, the Victorian. And Nancy loved the Victorian time period. And she actually, before she passed, she called me one day and she said, I'd like to do some advertising, get people to have some feel of this Victorian feel of the cemetery. So she said, I'm going to put on a Victorian dress and come and take photographs. So I took a number of photographs, and we're using this image of her in our flyer now for this Victoriana Day. And what's going to happen is we're going to have a conference, 3 parts. There's going to be a conference on funeral practices of the Victorian period, superstitions, mourning attire, jewelry, and rituals. Then we'll have a walking tour through the Victorian part of the cemetery. I'm going to show them all the different symbolisms from the Victorian period. And we're even going to go into the receiving vault and see that tomb. And then we're going to come back to the center, and we're going to have a Victorian funeral tea and serve different foods that was served during the times of funerals. Raisin pie was a recipe we just found. Prune cake was another one. Cookies with little skulls that was stamped onto it. And it's really it's a phenomenal history. And then and then we'll have music too. We're going to do a number of old Victorian songs that were very popular. Nearer to God, Amazing Grace. And I even have one of my board members, Henry Vas Nunez, who's a trumpeter and a math teacher at the same time, but he's a trumpeter, and he's going to play taps on the hill while we listen. And then I'm going to show them the words, and we're going to sing, because taps have lyrics. So I want the people to learn the lyrics too and tell the story about how this song developed. So that's Victoriana Day, a great educational program that I think people, and we're doing it in honor of Nancy's memory on her 5th anniversary. So, and as I said, the calendar is filled. We're going to have a Mother's Day concert.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Yeah. Can you tell me a bit about, because this caught my eye here, and it's a program, and it's dedicated in the honor of a film director, Irving Rapper, who directed one of my favorite films ever with Betty Davis, Now Voyager, and it's a program for kids. Can you tell us a bit about this?
Yes, that starts tomorrow, in fact, and it just closed out. We have 11 kids, and I was very fortunate to meet a young man by the name of Aaron Ciazza. And Aaron is a film director. He's done a number of documentaries, and he does commercials. And he was we connected, and he was telling me I've always wanted to do a program where I could teach kids how to make small documentaries and introduce them into the film industry. And I talked to Maple Grove, and I said, could we have this program here at Maple Grove? Could Maple Grove sponsor it? And Bonnie Dixon, who's the executive director, said, yes, of course, we can have it. So last year we started the program. We had 5 Saturdays. We met for 2 hours. Aaron brought in experienced people from the field. He brought in a writer. He brought in an editor. He brought people who do music. And we had 10 kids. And the kids, we also got a grant from the Josephine Foundation, and they gave us enough money to buy camcorders. So it's called Kids with Cameras Making a Movie. And so the kids, he told them about finding a topic that interests them, whatever it was, and they could make a 5-minute documentary. So they did all this raw footage, and they learned how to do interviews, and they learned an arc of a storyline. And they brought all their footage to Aaron, and he worked on it, and he did the editing, edited the music, did special effects, and we had a film premiere later on. And the kids were able to watch their films with titles and with the credits written by, photographed by, and with the title and music and everything. So it was just phenomenal. So it was so successful last year. This is our 2nd year, and now so it's starting tomorrow. We have 11 kids. Very excited to meet these professionals in the film industry. And on April 8th, when everything is completed, we're going to have a film premiere, red carpet. We even bought a red carpet and have popcorn, and we're going to invite the public to come in and watch these films that these kids created. And they're 10, 11, 15-year-olds. That was the age group that we're working with.
Nice.
And it's honor of Irving Rapper. And as you said, he was the great Hollywood film director who directed Betty Davis and Now Voyager, and he's buried at Maple Grove, and he died when he was 101.
Just recently passed away. That's terrific.
Yes, and he was 101 when he passed. And so in his honor, we do that. And as I said, every program has to have a historic connection to Maple Grove. And we have a puppet workshop that's going to be done in April, and it's a 4-hour program. We have David Stein and Ido Tuckman, and they're Kew Garden residents, and they wanted to do this puppet workshop to teach kids how to make string puppets. And so I'm thinking about it, and Bonnie Dixon said, yes, of course, you can use the center. And I just remembered that a few years before, Sharon Tavares was buried at Maple Grove. And Sharon Tavares was 11 years old when she died, and she appeared as Nala in Lion King on Broadway. And that's a unique puppet show with all the puppets that they use.
Sure.
So that puppet workshop is in honor of Shannon Tavares. So we have a magic show also on our calendar, and again, that's in honor of Henry Hatton, who was a famous magician, and who was a friend of Harry Houdini, and was president of the American Society of Magicians, and wrote a book in 1911 about magic that's still published today.
Nice. So it's a full calendar. And,
full calendar. You can just go to the website and find it.
The Friends of Maple Grove.org. And as we discussed, we'll try and work something out. We come to the show there one night, but we definitely like you to come back and talk some more about some history. So you're a great interview, and you're just full of lots of great knowledge.
The wheels of my head are turning constantly.
That's great.
I have a lot of stories to tell you.
Listen, you're our kind of guy. Thank you so much for calling.
Okay, Ed. Good night. Thank you.
Look forward to talking to you soon. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Bye.
Bye. That's Carl Ballenas, everybody, and when you look at this website, the Friends of the Maple Grove .org, and you see everything they've got going on there, and it's a real hidden treasure, and we're going to do our best to make sure everyone gets to see everything that they're doing here, because they're doing some special stuff here, and all this great history right here in Queens.